Through the heart of Leningrad flows the Neva River. Along these banks, nearly 3 centuries ago, one man created a great city, St. Petersburg, which became the capital of Imperial Russia. Today, Peter the Great still looks out over his city. With watchful eye, he gazes on wondrous visions. Grand and exuberant visions of a Tsar who, like his country, was strong and proud. Fairy tale palaces sprung up as if by magic. Country playgrounds for the imperial court of Peter and his successors, designed by the great architects of Europe, created from exquisite materials by a multitude of craftsmen summoned from afar. On long winter nights, these rooms were made brilliant by candlelight, reflected 1,000-fold in crystal mirrors. Light danced on paintings overhead and set the walls ablaze with color. Light burned in gilded figures as costumed nobility danced into the night. They waltzed on parquet floors of wood from the forests of Europe and Asia, designed in astonishing patterns. Surrounded by their treasures, the Tsars and their court waltzed on into the 20th century. The dance ended with the Russian Revolution in 1917, but the palaces lived on as museums. Then distant rumblings in Europe suddenly exploded on their doorstep. In 1941, Nazi forces surrounded Leningrad. Hitler planned to level the city, but the Soviet army would not yield. During the siege, the Nazis occupied 4 palaces on the city outskirts. After 900 days, they withdrew, burning the palaces as they left. When the fires died, a nation's treasures lay in ruin. At the Catherine Palace, chimneys protruded from a roofless skeleton. Statues, victims of bombshells and gunfire. Stillness filled the great hall. Parquet floors lay charred under a blanket of winter snow. A soldier in the Soviet army, Alexander Kadrinsky, remembers the siege. After the Nazi retreat, he entered the Catherine Palace. On this spot, in the Great Hall, he looked up through broken rafters at the winter sky.
В самом дворце те интерьеры, которые
Inside the palace, the interiors that were not burned were looted. Pictures had been viciously slashed out of their frames. Only the outer edges remained. Doors were broken away. Paintings were on the floor, cut to pieces. That's one thing. The other thing is that there were landmines hidden everywhere, and the palace itself was set to blow up.
Авиабомб по тонне весом каждая. И кроме того, вся система павильонов и дворца была подключена к...
Beneath it was a series of one-ton bombs wired together to go up in a single blast. It's a miracle that the first soldiers to enter the palace gates after the German retreat discovered this system and disarmed it.
Перекопанный окопами парк.
The park around the palace was dug up everywhere with trenches and gun emplacements. And in the middle lay the charred hulk of the palace. The palace decorations were strewn about the park in pieces. Sculpture, arms, heads, torsos lay all about. The picture was so terrible and depressing that one's first impression was that resurrecting it would be impossible. On the other hand, people could not reconcile themselves to blotting out a page of history, the glorious history of these monuments. And so we decided to undertake the restoration. Pieces of the ruined palaces were scattered everywhere, hastily hidden before the siege. From fields, from secret vaults, from the hands of retreating Nazis, even from the Neva River, the missing pieces were returned. Restoration could now begin. A painter and engineer, Kudrinsky directed the work at the Catherine Palace. "We long to recreate these monuments," he said at the time, "but do we have the guts to do it?" Under his direction, scores of artists and craftsmen began to rebuild the palace. Today, Alexander Kudrinsky works with a new generation of artisans who use original architectural drawings and pre-war photographs that miraculously survived the destruction. From an old black and white photograph, a painted ceiling comes to life. The design is rendered in color, and figures are drawn to scale by artists trained in period styles and techniques. Designs are modified and approved before the painting begins. For hours at a time, they reach overhead. Standing so close to the ceiling, these artists are unable to see the entire painting at once. Skill and planning guide them where their eyes cannot. After 3 years of work, the ceiling is almost finished. Parts of a statue were retrieved from the palace grounds. From these shattered limbs, a body is reformed. A woodcarver creates anew what fire and shrapnel destroyed. With clay, he models a missing twin that he will later replicate in wood. On the statue's chest, a fracture is mended, and a wound is healed. Once again, carvings are adorned with gold. Though each leaf weighs almost nothing, nearly 20 pounds of gold were needed to refurbish the Great Hall.
Huh?
Guided into place by human breath and held there by rabbit skin glue, The gold is burnished with an amber rod. Gilded faces blaze again. The palaces are reborn. The glory that was Imperial Russia radiates from every quarter once again. But today it shines with new brilliance. Reflected in the symmetry of crystal mirrors is the labor of modern craftsmen who have saved the treasures of a nation. In 1944, Peter's portrait was found in shredded fragments, scattered in the snow. Today, the scars are almost invisible. We rebuild these palaces to celebrate those who built them long ago, says Kudrinsky. But we need another 20 years before our work is finished. Today, from atop his horse, Peter the Great gazes on a miracle. Through heroic endeavors, his vision lives on.